Perle-Benz Center proudly present the USO, How It All Began, with your host, Sheppy Green.
Hey everybody, Sheppy Green here. Of course, Sheppy's just my nickname. My real name is Boris. Now, I got the name Sheppy when I was a kid because my parents took me into a pet shop and I fell in love with a little German Shepherd. Boy, I'm sure glad they sold out of those Shih Tzus the day before he went in. Hey, you know what? I once knew a girl who lived so far out in the country that her zip code was E-I-E-I-O. Did you hear about the big fire over at the bread factory? Yeah, oh, that place is now toast. Wow, with no audience, it's almost like we're having a real show. No laughs. Hey, the pandemic shut us down this year, ladies and gentlemen, just like it did for most of America, which is kind of ironic because these original USO shows were actually done in war zones. That's right, on the decks of battleships in heaving seas or carved out of jungles with mosquitoes so thick they'd actually show up on radar. But this year, the whole thing was shut down by a virus that looks like a Las Vegas beach ball. So we've put together this little bit here to tell you a history of the actual real live USO shows and how we came about doing our USO shows. And I pinky promise that next year we'll be back with a show bigger and better than ever. It'll be a brand new show with the same old jokes, just like we have done for the last 17 years. Speaking of donuts, I have one of those, yeah. Oh. Let's start off the show just like we do each year.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Roosevelt Presidential Library and Museum is proud to present the first ever history of the USO and the USO show at the Roosevelt Presidential Library and Museum with your host, Sheppy Green.
That's how we start the show each year. But let's find out how the USO show started originally. And to do that, we're going to go back in time.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press.
Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air, President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack also was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy. FDR had worked so hard to keep us out of the war, but suddenly we were in it. Every man, woman, and child is in this now, FDR said in a fireside chat on December 9th, 1941. And America's patriotic young men and women were up for the challenge. All across the United States, tens of thousands enlisted in the military service of their country. Before long, more than 1 million young men were in uniform and stationed at bases from coast to coast. There, they received their training and anxiously awaited their deployment orders overseas. But what would they do in the meantime? How do you keep 1.1 million red-blooded, battle-ready, gung-ho young men busy? We have an idea! In wholesome and productive activities? Aww. Roosevelt had an idea too. Inspired by the work that some organizations were already doing, FDR asked the YWCA, the YMCA, the Jewish Welfare Board, the Salvation Army, the Travelers Aid Association, and the National Catholic Community Services to combine forces and pool resources to create the United Services Organization, more affectionately and popularly known as the USO. On February 4th, 1941, the USO was formally chartered by Congress. Connecticut Senator Prescott Bush, dad and granddad of future presidents, along with Thomas Dewey of New York, were tapped to spearhead the fundraising efforts. Nervous homefront parents, seeing their vested interest in keeping their young sons comfy and cozy with wholesome activities, ponied up more than $16 million. That would be over, let's see, that would be over $291 million in today's money. With that sort of enthusiasm and financial backing, USO centers began to spring up almost anywhere where there were soldiers stationed. In houses, barns, storefronts, church basements, anywhere. These USO base camps became places for soldiers to come and get some of the comforts of home. They offered a wide variety of services, from coffee and donuts to stationery and stamps, magazines, movies, listening to music, or maybe just someone they could talk to. Wow, sewing. I always wanted to learn how to do this. Miss, would you mind if I try? Thank you. So what do you just like poke it in through here like, ow, ow, oh, I think I just poked myself. Ow, oh, I'm bleeding. Oh, medic!
I was walking along, minding my business, out of an orange-colored sky. Flash, bam, Alakazam, wonderful you came by. I was humming a tune, drinking in sunshine, out of that orange-colored hue. Wham, bam, Alakazam, I gotta look at you. One look and I yell timber, watch out for flying glass. Cause you see the feeling in the body, fell out, I went into a spin and I started to shout and hit. This is it. I was walking along, minding my business. Love came and hit me in the eye. Well, bam, Alakazam, out of the orange-colored sky. Well, one look and I yell timber, watch out for flying glass. Cause the feeling burning in the bottom fell out, I went into a spin and I started to shout and hit. This is it. I was walking along, minding my business. Love came and hit me in the eye. Well, bam, Alakazam, out of the orange color. Purple stripe, pretty green polka dot sky. Well, bam, Alakazam. When colors start.
It soon became time for the troops to head overseas, and the USO was not far behind, bringing the same little comforts of home as they always had, but adding a new feature, providing entertainment for the troops. The formula was simple: homespun productions on makeshift stages with big-name stars like Bob Hope, Lena Horne, Jack Benny, Doris Day, Don Knotts, Donna Reed, and others. And the ingredients were pure. Humor, often at the expense of the military, music, dancing, and plenty of pretty women. The shows were set up on the decks of battleships, on flatbed train cars, boxing rings, naturally occurring amphitheaters, pretty much any place you could assemble a group of weary men looking for an hour or two of respite and relaxation. That's where the show would be put on. I still want one of those donuts. Let me try again. The first Roosevelt Presidential Library Museum USO show was held in 2004. That's the year that the long overdue World War II memorial was opened in Washington, D.C. The memorial is dedicated to the 16 million men and women who served in the military during World War II. For years, the library had hosted an annual bivouac, that's a military term for temporary camp, on the Great Lawn out in front of the Library Museum. Since FDR was the commander-in-chief during World War II, we thought it would be great to honor the greatest generation with the bivouac and a USO show. I'm going back for one of those donuts, but this time I'm going back with steel reinforcement.
When you smiled at me, I heard a melody. It haunted me from the start. All nature seemed to be in perfect harmony. Sing with the strings of my heart. I said the world, it still is the same. You'll never change it. Just as sure well, look about and find yourself somebody to love. Here is called non dimenticar. Now, if you're not Italian, that means get in the back of the car. If you want to hold his hand, you can do that, as long as it's your husband's hand. Non dimenticar means don't forget you are my darling.
Outwitted by the size of the cup, but I'll get it this time. It takes months to prepare the USO show, and though Sheppy Green, the show's hapless host, gets to be out there in the spotlight, there are dozens of people who work behind the scenes to make the show happen. People like Cliff Lawby, Kevin Thomas, Darian Rivera, and of course the library's various directors over the years, Cynthia Cook, Lynn Bassanese, and Paul Sparrow. The first year, the library's education specialist, Jeff Urban, morphed into Sheppy Green right before the audience's eyes. And Sheppy's been with us, for better or worse, ever since.
Sheppy is an idiot, yeah? An idiot.
Sheppy is a guy who wants to be a comedian.
He's about as funny as a train wreck.
And he's so dedicated to the audience getting the joke that he does his own rim shots.
He suffers from such a delusional self-awareness and insecurity that he does his own rim shots for attention. It's pathetic.
Part of the formula for our show is what we call the show within the show. So each year, before he's even finished his monologue, Sheppy finds himself in a fix, brought on usually by his own wide-eyed innocence and, well, let's face it, his lack of intelligence. His antagonist is played generally by Mark Merritt. But somehow, by the third act, through his big heart and his good intentions, Sheppy always manages to come out on top.
He is perpetually in trouble and turmoil because he is an idiot. I don't know how else to say it. But somehow, and don't ask me how, Sheppy always comes out on top. Perhaps there is something we can learn from Sheppy.
Sheppy is loosely based on the cheesy nightclub acts that filled the Catskills in the post-war period. Sheppy is basically a well-meaning doofus whose only real talent is finding other talent. People like Hilby the Skinny German Jungle Boy, Mark Reich and his band, singer Maria B. Hickey, and the variety of acts that come from the Bindlestiff family circus.
There you are. So glad to have you. Thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of the USO show. We're coming at you from Bindlestiff's Pandemic Bunker. Safe in here, and right now we're going to give you a little bit of a vaudeville classic. So friends, grab onto your seats, hold onto your hats. Here we go for all of you Ed Sullivan fans in the audience. This one's for you. If you have a kitchen at home, give this a try later. Introducing you now to what I like to think of as bowl number 1. Can't just leave it with just the bowl spinning. We're going to add a little bit more excitement in here with another classic, the old spoon in the can. Oh, we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, let's first of all make it even more exciting with bowl number 2. Introducing you now to what I like to think of as bowl number 3. Twice the excitement. 2 cans, 2 spoons. Oh. Oh, we're gonna. Oh, whoops, I'll be back. Oh! Falling apart around here, okay. Have no worries, we have more bowls right here in the bucket. Three out of 5, that's like a A in today's school system. At least he's trying. Introducing now, bowl number 4. Introducing now, count with me folks, bowl number 5. Introducing now, bowl number 6. Introducing now, bowl number 7. Introducing now, bowl number 8. Oh, but first, let's look at some of the others real quick. Here we go. Oh. Here we are. Ah! My name is Keith Nelson, and I'm with the Bindlestiff Family Circus.
Ah, the memories. Some of you who are with us each year will remember some of these props. 2007, when Sheppy's uncle was thought to be a deserter. Turns out he was a pastry chef. 2012, when that alien showed up thinking it was a UFO show and not a USO show. And who could forget 2014 with Sheppy Pinehole? You know, several dozen actors lost their lives with the USO shows over the years, either getting to the performances or getting back. The most famous, of course, Glenn Miller, whose plane went down in the English Channel. I almost lost my life one year. It was the year with Sheppy Pinehole. Sheppy Pinehole had stolen Sheppy's act, and Sheppy was going to get back at him. So he kidnapped Sheppy Pinehole, put him in a suitcase, and then took a chainsaw and was going to chop him up. Well, in the suitcase was wood chips, and Sheppy was throwing the wood chips up in the air. The audience saw the wood chips coming out of the suitcase, and half the audience was dying. They saw Sheppy chainsawing Sheppy. The other half of the audience was mesmerized because what they saw was the wood chips going through the air and pelting our piano player and his piano. That was the year I almost lost my life, because when I came off stage, the piano player was furious. Luckily, we were able to make him whole, pay for his piano to be fixed, and to get his suit cleaned, and everything was fine. Of course, he did go home with a few splinters. We hope you've enjoyed this little history of the USO show and the history of our USO show. We missed you this year, but we'll be back again next year with an even better show. In the meantime, be safe, be well, be Sheppy.